Hello, my lovelies. So this is the Moleskine that I'm working in this year for Mini Moley Daily. It's not really mini, but I really wanted to reuse this planner that I had used last year for to-do lists. So I decided that I was just going to reuse it. I believe I first saw this done for a class called, oh, I can't remember the name of it. No Excuses, I think. No Excuses Art Journaling. I can't remember who did it. I didn't take the class, but I sort of gleaned from the images of it that were popping up. This was a couple of years ago, that it was done in an old planner. So that's where the idea originated. So this is my very first entry in this Moleskine. It is actually a print of a piece that I did for Mixtape Monthly, which is something I offer in speed painting format and also full-length art tutorial format over on my Patreon, which is patreon.com/FEWild. So this, I just printed it out. I glued down some pretty scrapbook paper, and then I glued the image of the spread to it and called it a day. Day 2, I added some gesso to the scrapbook background, and then painted kind of like a close-up of the lavender that you find in this painting, and added the sentiment, Deep Breathe. This was done on Canson Mixed Media art paper on my couch while I was watching something. This is just, I like playing with lettering and I like playing with watercolors, and I often do that on the couch. So I did that on the couch and then just cut it out and glued it into the Mini Moly. This was done directly in the Mini Moly, but on, again, Canson XL Mixed Media paper. So I just glued in a piece and then did this watercolor. Grateful Lee's working on it. This was done on cover stock that I glued in to the journal. Again, this was done on my couch, and this was done directly on the Moleskine paper. So what I did here was I added a layer of gesso and then a layer of clear gesso, and then I played with some watercolors. I call these watercolor meditations. I really find them very calming and peaceful to do. So I'll like lay down color and let it bleed into each other, and then with a black pen I'll go in and outline areas that are interesting to me, shifts in value and color. They feel like maps or topography. I really like them. This was done again directly in the journal using some, I think, Dilutions paints, as well as some Dina Wakley paints. This is the Dina Wakley stamp, and then the lettering is mine. That feeling when the black dog slinks away and the clouds part, and the bluebird of happiness once more lends once more to sing in my ear. I was feeling a shift in mood that was really wonderful, so I just wanted to acknowledge that. This was done directly on the Moleskine on a layer of spray gesso. It would be super fucking rad if you'd be less of a douche. This is a macro of what's called a multi-day spread that I taught for Book of Days. I just printed out the area that I found most interesting. You can see here one of my watercolor meditations there in the background. Glued down a piece of watercolor paper and then glued down the print. And then I usually cover these with a layer of Tri-Art Medium. That's this stuff here. Tri-Art Polymer Medium. It's a gloss medium. You can get a very similar product from Golden, but it's much more expensive, so I use this one. And then I just cover these prints in that medium, and then I heat up the page just with a heat gun like this. Rub on some white wax from a candle. It's just a tea light candle. And then buff it, and then that prevents sticking. This is a painting that I printed out and glued in. This is from Moonshine, New Moon in Capricorn. This was my intention spread. This is the complete MDS spread for Book of Days that includes everything that I put in that multi-day spread. This was done directly in the journal. This was done on Canson XL Mixed Media art paper. I believe I glued that in. No, this was done on gesso. This is another one of those art watercolor meditations but I didn't do the outlining. I just stuck down some stamped lettering on that one. This, I used the leftover paint to create this just on gesso. And then this was just done in a little Canson XL spiral bound journal. I cut her out and glued her down. Same treatment, I put the polymer medium on top and then waxed the page. This was so fun. This was an experiment that I did with the Dina Wakley paints in the little fine point tubes. I'm in love with these. I do have a caution about these though. Just give me a second and I'll make sure I remember to mention it. But this was just playing with the colors from Dina Wakley and then letting it dry. And then I did some lettering over top with this pen. This is a Pilot Permaball pen. What I love about the Dina Wakley paints is that they really take pen very easily after they're dry. What I don't love about them is I can't layer on top of them with golden acrylics without the golden acrylics peeling. It appears that the golden just peels right off of these mixed media paints. So that is something that I noticed. And then now I know, right? If I want to use these, then I won't layer with the acrylics over top. This was done directly in the journal with a layer of my spray gesso on top of it. And this was done with Tombow markers and a little bit of Jane Davenport's paints as well. And then some Faber-Castell in the background. This writing was done with the Pilot Permaball pen and then just a white marker. This is a print of a piece that I did for Book of Days. Again, I just put down some scrapbook paper and glued the print to it. This one I haven't treated with gloss medium yet. It's just plain paper at this point. This was an experiment that failed. I used a Bouguereau painting. This, in the original painting, this girl is holding a bouquet of wildflowers. I really wanted to work with a bouquet of heart flowers, and I love everything about this except that I tried to go back in and outline and it just ruined it for me. But that's okay because I ended up using this idea for a spread that I did for Book of Days. No, this was for Mixtape, where I did the same paper painting. So this was done with tissue paper or napkin down here, and then these were all little hearts cut out of text pages. And I duplicated that idea for this spread. So that was really fun to kind of do an experiment, have it fail miserably, or mess it up royally, and then turn it into something really workable for a lesson that I was doing. This was the official beginning of my 52 Faces in 52 Weeks challenge. I really want to start making looser faces, so this is an example of what I mean by that. There's no outlining on this at all. I used mostly fluid acrylics for this, golden fluid acrylics for this painting, and then I added the text on gold. I paint text pages gold and then write my sentiment on it with that Pilot Permaball and glued it down. Can we please just skip February altogether? February is my least month. And you can see I was already thinking about February on the 21st and 22nd of January. This is a copy of the MTM Mixtape Monthly spread that I did, that I printed out, glued down onto some scrapbook paper. And this is a macro of painting that I did for Moonshine, for full moon. This was another one of my portrait experiments. This was done mostly with Faber-Castell Pitt pens and a little touch of dilution sprays in the face. This background was done with dilution sprays that were sprayed into gloss medium and then dried, fixed with workable fixative, and then I stenciled over top of it with some teal from Golden. This again is just stamped. This was another playing with portraits for the 52 Portrait Challenge. This was mostly done with Dina Wakley paints and Faber-Castell markers. And then I just like went crazy on the background. You are allowed to want what you want, so go ahead and want everything. This is the lapis color from the Dina Wakley paints. Beautiful, beautiful blue. I love it so much. Again, this was just done on gessoed Moleskine paper. And I just finished this today. This is Fly Your Freak Flag. This painting, this portrait here is really inspired by, I keep seeing Deb Wyer's paintings pop up in my feed, and I love her, the way she does doodles in her face. But it's really interesting the way I actually did this face. I call this a one-liner portrait. What I did was I started the portrait with the upper lip, and then without lifting my pen, I kept on drawing and created the face in one line. I just never lifted my pen. And then I brought paints in to refine it. That was really, really fun. This is a print again of the MTM and again of the painting I did for Moonshine. Just because this was released on the 31st of the month, and this was released on the 1st of February, on the 31st of the month as well. So all of this came out over the span of these 2 days. So I just stuck them in there again. And that just let me give a different version of these. Let me see here. No, it's the same version, but that's fine. I mean, I cheat like crazy in these. I just print things and shove them in there just in order that I can keep on top of this challenge, because I really struggled with this challenge last year after April. So I really want to give myself lots of permission to embrace, be perfectly imperfect in this journal and just throw in whatever I want, even if I'm sometimes doubling up as I did here. It's really funny to me though that these two ended up, these were painted separately from each other by a number of days, and yet I still put them together. I find that very interesting. I'm wondering what that says about me. And then this brings us to the 2nd and 3rd of February, which I haven't completed yet. It's the 3rd of February today, so I'm thinking about putting some work into this, maybe a portrait. But I would like to prepare the spread with some spray gesso. And I want to do that just so that you can see how easy it is to work with and how lovely of a finish it is. Now the only thing about this that I would caution you against is that you are going to be breathing particulate matter if you use this gesso. So be aware of that. If you have any kind of lung issues, be aware of that. Try and spray it in a very well ventilated place, or use a respirator if necessary. I'm just going to go ahead and see if I can get this to sit down by using a clip. Where are my clips? Here we go. So I'm just going to clip the corner there, see if I can get that to sit down properly. I've got the back of a watercolor pad that I've been using. This was the cover of my watercolor paper that I used to make my art journal, and it's become a mask or backsplash. So I just put that there in front of me whenever I'm using this stuff. And you have to shake it really, really well, or you end up with a kind of an ooze monster. Just kind of oozes out this like clear liquid. But if you give it a good enough shake, you can get some amazing coverage with this spray gesso, which I found of all places at Walmart. I'll give that a spray. You can see billowing clouds of particulate matter, so be careful with your lungs when using this stuff. And then I usually just walk away and let those dry, because you can spray them with a heat gun, and that does increase your drying time. But usually when I'm preparing these, I'm finished whatever I did that day, and I'm preparing the spread so I can come back to it the next day. But you can see you get a really nice clear, or sorry, not clear, but a really nice smooth coverage with this, and it actually beefs up the paper a little bit. So this paper I'm working with here is very thin, but once I have this layer of gesso on it, it stands up to pretty much anything I want to throw at it. So I've scrubbed paint into it, I scrubbed markers onto it, I do all sorts of stuff to it, and it really stands up. So I just thought I would share that tip with you. If you're using the Moleskine paper, Any gesso will do in creating a first layer, but this spray gesso is really handy. I'm finding it really, really handy, and also I'm really loving the finish that I get. You can see from looking at this, you can still see the lines kind of showing up through. That's kind of half the charm for me of using this planner. I kind of want to see that stuff as I'm working. And then, of course, as I continue to add layers, that all disappears. But when I'm doing stuff like text or portraits, these lines help me know like what size things are, so I can like measure, you know, 4 lines for my text, or maybe count lines and you know, split an oval in half so I know where my eye line goes. These lines are kind of helpful in the painting process. So I just wanted to come on and give you guys a little tour of my Moleskine. We have a Facebook group called Mini Moley Daily. Some of us are no longer working mini. We did that last year. Some of us have moved into other journals. The point of this challenge is to do little bits of art on a daily basis and then build up this amazing body of work that we can enjoy years later. This was my mini moley from last year. You can see I stopped at a certain point. This was April and May. I stopped. Stuff was going on in my life that made it difficult to keep up. I tried to pick it back up again in August, but again, that did not work out. Oh, that's so sad. But a lot of these are on YouTube as like mini spreads, time-lapse spreads that you can see. Lots of them included music. Or they were inspired by music. And what I loved about this process, and what I'm loving about it now, is that I have this opportunity to experiment with different mediums and different techniques, but I'm not, this was painted directly in my journal by Miss Sarah Trump, and this was using Sarah's Demon stencils. So yeah, experiments like this was an experiment with paint and oil pastels, and I realized afterward that it would have been better to use the oil pastels on top of the paint, because the oil pastels would have stuck to, how did I do that? Yeah, I tried to paint on top of oil pastels. It didn't work out so well. So just experiments and playing and not letting things be too terribly stressful, some life documentation, lots of portrait practice, photographs that I would just glue in there. She's always been a little on the dark side of Faye. That's my autobiography right there. Just really, really super fun little spreads, and very inspiring. We got lots of ideas from this spread for projects that I did in larger format. But again, because it's so tiny, and because it was so easy to fill this up in the way that I did, it was just not intimidating at all. But like I said, stuff happened later on this year, last year, that just sort of stopped me in my tracks. I'm hoping that that does not happen this year. I do intend to fill this up at some point. I would like to continue using it, but I'm going to use it in a less structured way than I'm using this one. This one is for the challenge, the Mini Moley Challenge. I also wanted to make a note of the fact that sometimes I do a spread in a day and it counts over 2 days. So if I didn't do anything on this day, I'll come in and I'll use the entire spread. And sometimes what I do is I'll start a spread, especially with a portrait, because of the 52 portraits and 52 days challenge that I'm currently doing. I'll do the portrait, make sure there's a background here, and then the next day all I have to do is add a sentiment. So you saw that in a couple of places. This one was all done in 1 day, but this was done over 2 days. I did the portrait and then I did the sentiment. Same with here, I did the portrait and then I did the sentiment. So lots of wiggle room to do this in any way that works for you. no stress. It's really, I intend for this to have like no stressful component to it at all. And I'm just really enjoying having an opportunity to play in a less intense way than I normally do. I mean, this is my usual fare. Let me just put this aside to dry. I usually work quite large, and my spreads can take anywhere upwards of 2 to 4 hours. So having a place where I can play that doesn't take 2 to 4 hours, you know, the average spread that I do in the Moleskine, it takes maybe an hour. Having this, having both practices is really nice for me. And then, like I said, all of the stuff that I do in the big journals, I can print off and glue into the Moly, and it counts because that's art that I did that day. You know what I mean? So instead of like trying to do, okay, I did a big lesson, and now I have to go do a little spread. No. I can just glue these spreads into the little Moly as a record of what I actually did that day art-wise. So that's how I'm using it this year. Some of us are using it differently. Yeah, so I just thought I would show you and take you on a little tour through it so far. It's going to need to be rebound soon. Oh yeah, and I just wanted to mention that I've saved some pages in the front I want to do some life documentation. So this is going to be my January spread, February spread, March spread, and so on, so that every month of the year has a life documentation component to it. I may do inchies of macros of all of the little spreads that I did throughout the month, or I may just use photographs or some text or whatever. But at the end of this year, what I hope to have is this book completely full, and in the cover of the book, in the front of the book, these spreads that kind of summarize the month. So I hope you enjoy that. Bye!